Today we're going to be creating a motion path with a camera attached. So the first thing that we need to do is to create a camera. And to do so, we will go to the file level menu, to the create option on the file level menu, create cameras, camera. You can see that there are a couple of other options here. For this basic example, we're going to use regular old camera. Click on that and a camera will appear zeroed out on your grid. You can move that around, you can rotate it, you can do whatever you'd like with the camera. Normally this would be plenty. You could use this, you can keyframe this as you would an animation, but a simple way to move a camera around is to attach it to a motion path. To get a motion path, we need to move from our normal poly modeling shelf to the curves and surfaces shelf. On the curves and surfaces shelf, you'll find the EP curve tool. Select that tool, and for this next phase, I find it helpful to work in the orthographic view to start. So hit spacebar, and I like to use the top view. Depending on the motion path you're drawing and its contours, you may choose side view or front view. But top view will give us an overview about the directionality of the camera on the motion path. So I'm going to choose top. Now I have my top view ready to go. You can begin to draw your motion path. Curve tools are the 3D modeling equivalent of vectors, whereas polygons are the 3D modeling equivalent of a bitmap or a JPEG. So if you are familiar with using vectors, you will be familiar with the process of using the EP curve tool. When you're ready to begin drawing your curve, it doesn't look like you have a new tool created because you only have a white cursor hovering in your viewport, but when you click, you'll see that you're dropping a point. Drop your next point and you have a straight line. But when you drop your third point, Maya will begin to create a curve. It's okay if this curve doesn't follow the exact contour of the curve that you want. We can adjust these points later on. So I'm just going to draw a simple round path around my polygon model. So I'm happy with this motion path's general shape. So what I can do is hit Q to return to select tool, and you can see I have this point curve. So I'm going to go ahead and hit spacebar and go back to perspective view. You can see that the curve is adhering sort of to the grid, and that's what is so great about using the orthographic view. None of the control points of my curve are leaving this axis. They'll be completely flat. Now, if I wanted to modify this curve in any way, I can right-click on it. Right-click on it, just like you would with a polygon model. And you can see that I have different options in this menu than I would for my polygonal object. I have curve point, object mode, hull, edit point, and control vertex. If I want to modify the shape of my curve, I can select control vertex, and you can see that I'm given a series of points here. So I can use my select tool and the move tool in conjunction to begin to adjust my path. This is one way of making modifications to your path. And just like I said before, these are controlled mathematically between the points. This is essentially a vector. So it can take a little bit of fine-tuning, but you are able to modify it once it's been created. So once I'm satisfied with the overall shape, I can go back into object mode, and I can also scale or rotate this path. So here I'm going to rotate it slightly, and then I'm going to scale it up so that it takes a little bit further away. Okay. All right, so this is going to be like a fairly dynamic camera attaching to a path. So now I have my curve and I have my camera. And I need to attach both together. To do that, we need to go into a different menu set than we normally use. So over here, you can see the drop-down menu set is set to modeling. This is our typical menu set that we use. Click on the menu set drop-down box and go to animation. Once you click animation, you'll see that we have a different file level menu. All of these things are a little bit different than what we would have in modeling. I want you to go to the constrain option in the file level menu. Open constrain, and you can see that we have multiple options in here. You can also see we have an option for motion paths and attach to motion path. So select both your camera and your motion path. Go to constrain, motion paths, attach to motion path, and the option menu box. Click on that. Within this options menu, you can see that we have additional methods for controlling the way our camera attaches to the motion path. We can set a time range for the camera to move along the motion path. We have a time slider, so it will default to the amount of time within our time slider, which at present is 200 frames. We can set a start and an end frame, or we can specify a start only. We have at present a start time of the first frame and an end time of 500 frames. I think this sounds good as a starting point. It may take a little trial and error for you to find what feels right for your model. Depending on the scale of the motion path, it may take longer or shorter for your camera to travel along it. So expect to come back to this options menu to adjust later. We can always hit undo, so don't worry about getting it perfectly right the first time around. Now, moving down the menu, you can see that follow is checked. We want the camera to follow the motion path, so that's appropriate. Front axis, this is another thing that you may have to return to and check. You can use the legend in the bottom left of your viewport to give you a sense of maybe what direction your camera should be going in. X seems okay to me based on the camera position and the motion path, but because it's curved, there's no telling. So the one thing that is probably going to remain consistent is your up axis. You can see that the up axis by default is Y, and that makes sense for a camera to travel along with an up axis of Y. Skipping down, there are a couple of other options here that can be of use to you. If you want your camera to travel upside down, or your camera attaches upside down, you can use this checkbox to invert up. If your camera travels backward along the motion path once you've constrained it to the motion path, you can check this box to invert the front. So that will cause the camera to turn around. And the last option here is bank. So if you've ever been on a roller coaster, you know that when you go around a corner, you tilt slightly. If you select this option, the camera will tilt slightly into a curve rather than remaining straight up and down. This makes for a more dynamic shot, but it might not be what you're going for. If you would like to have a bank or a tilt as the camera moves around a curve, check this box. So once you're satisfied with these options, go ahead and say attach. So now I can see that my camera has attached pointing away from my subject. No worries, we can stop that from happening. I can simply hit undo to unconstrain my camera from my motion path and go back to the constrain menu, motion paths, attach to motion path, and the option box. I'm going to uncheck inverse front and say, actually, I want the camera to be moving on the Z axis so that it actually follows the motion path. So I'm going to say attach. Okay, so now my camera is going backwards, but it is following the motion path. So one more time here. I can go back to constrain, motion paths, attach to motion path, and inverse front. And when I attach it now, you can see that the camera and lens will follow the path directly around. So if you wanted to lead a camera through a scene, that would be one way to do it. If you did not, if you in fact wanted to have the camera look toward the middle, you could return to this axis and attach. Oops. Try that one last time. Here we go. Oh my Lord. This just does not want to turn inward. Another incredible demo. There we go, finally. So here we can see that I have constrained this camera to look toward my subject in the middle, but again, the option remains for you to reorient the camera's lens in a number of directions or follow the motion path directly. Okay, so I hope that explains some of the options for constraining it. Now, how do you tell what the camera is seeing? This is a really critical piece of information. So you want to be able to look through this camera, see what it's seeing, and make adjustments if you need to. In order to do that, you need to sacrifice one of your orthographic views. So in my case, the top view I think will still be helpful. So you want to choose the least helpful view in orthographic for your purposes. In my case, I think either the front or the side view will be able to be sacrificed. I'm going to choose the front view. So to create a viewable camera here, all I have to do is go to the viewport menus and select panels. Under panels, I'm looking for a perspective camera because we can move it around. It's not fixed in direction like an orthographic camera would be. And I'm going to select camera 1, which is the new camera that I have created. When I select camera 1, you can see I am now able to see what my camera sees. So if I move my time slider, this is my active viewport, if I move my time slider, I can see what my camera will see as it moves along. I can also hit play and watch to the loop. I can set my range to 500 in order to see the entire sequence. And playing through gets a little jostly and I lose my subject toward the end. So I might want to, in fact, raise my camera up, right? So this has shown me something really helpful. So I'm going to stop that. Another thing that you should be aware of is that the viewport can change sizes, right? The aspect ratio of the viewport is not fixed. In order to make sure that you are seeing the view that you will be seeing when you render this file, you have to do one more thing. If you go to View, Camera Settings, and Resolution Gate, Maya will use whatever resolution you currently have set in your render settings to show you what your camera will see in the correct aspect ratio. So you can see here, this is what my camera will actually see. The gray border is eliminating any excess viewport so I can compose my shot more carefully. So these are the things that I wanted to show you how to do. You have now seen how to constrain a camera to a motion path and how to configure a viewport to see what your camera is seeing, along with create a resolution gate.